Welcome to Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. The ATF has released their rule on the use of stabilizing braces, and it's worse than the initial proposed rule, which was already a dumpster fire. Coming in at a lean 291 pages, not counting other supporting documents, this massive document can essentially be summed up as follows. Almost all stabilizing braces transform your pistol into an SBR, and you have 120 days from the publication date of the rule, which is either today or maybe Monday, to register any braced pistols you have as SBRs under the NFA through the ATF. The ATF is not going to collect tax on any of these registrations if they pertain to this new rule, as long as you already possess it. It even has a special section on the e-file for Form 1s now to do this. If you go to try and buy a braced pistol now, however, it would not be exempt from this tax, and you would have to pay to classify it as an SBR in order to legally possess it. I started out the summation saying almost all because, of course, it gives a lot of examples on what qualifies as an SBR, but zero examples of when a brace is appropriate and does not create an SBR, which the proposed rule, at least, had done. This is an obvious attempt to scare everyone into registering their pistols and snuffing out the brace industry like a baby in a crib or a dog in the house of someone the ATF raids. They repeatedly insist that this is both not a brace ban and not a new law that redefines what a rifle is, and simply a clarification. It says nothing in this rule bans stabilizing braces or the use of stabilizing braces on pistols. However, firearms with an attached brace device may be subject to statutory and regulatory requirements depending on the firearm's objective design, features, and other factors. So it's not a ban, just like the NFA did not ban short-barreled rifles. It just requires new and unnecessary hoops to use them in most cases. And they make it clear that the use of braces has forced the ATF to amend the regulatory definition of rifle to make it clear to the public that objective design features and other factors must be considered when determining whether a firearm equipped with an accessory component or other rearward attachment, like a brace, is a rifle designed, made, and intended to be fired from the shoulder. And that shoulder ability is the primary focus of all the ins and outs contained within this new rule. So theoretically, another accessory or item attached to the rifle that makes it intended to be fired from the shoulder is an auto SBR. Funnily enough, the ATF still insists that they do not regulate accessories such as stabilizing braces in the accompanying FAQ document when answering the question of whether or not they have a list of braces that are automatically SBRs. Before I dive more into the rule itself to highlight a few things, I have found what may be an oopsie on the ATF's part. In the FAQ page, it clearly says one of the options you have is to permanently remove or alter the stabilizing brace so that it cannot be reattached, and therefore removing it from regulation as a firearm under the NFA. However, throughout the rule, it is written with an ever-important change, stating permanently remove and dispose of or alter the stabilizing brace such that it cannot be reattached, thereby removing the weapon from the regulation as a firearm under the NFA, and it says it this way multiple times throughout the rule. This goes back to the point, can you legally possess these braces if you just take them off of your pistol? This is addressed in the FAQ and specifically says that no, a stabilizing brace is not an NFA item, but it does say that an NFA firearm need not be regulated as such, and that they may hit you with an ominous constructive intent, depending on the facts of a particular case. In my mind, the FAQ and the rule contradict each other. The rule says destroy without question, and the FAQ says don't be ridiculous. We can't regulate accessories. You can possess it, but if you have them together, we may try to get you. The rule suggests that there is no new legal obligation to brace owners because the obligation stems from the NFA and GCA. And this is just clarifying that all the brace owners were basically felons committing gun crime. It was always a crime. The ATF was just not clear and inconsistent before, but now they are in line with the NFA and GCA. They just did not realize what those two acts said that they have been enforcing all of this time. Who knows what else they will find in there by clarifying single words into 200 plus page government documents in the future. The rule continues, going over the history of braces, referencing the original ruling, the proliferation of other braces that were being used to shoot from the shoulder, and that new braces coming out have objective design features that indicate an intention to be fired from the shoulder, and that the likely use of a weapon in the general community is factored into their assessment, and that it is intended to be fired from the shoulder. So technically, if we all stopped firing from the shoulder, would they suddenly be non-NFA creating accessories? The rule does not use the 4,999 worksheet from the originally proposed rule that included a point system to determine what is and is not an SBR. It was a terrible, stupid, and contradictory worksheet, but it did at least lay out specific parameters. This one is more just whatever the ATF feels like. These factors still include several items from the original worksheet, though, including weight and length considerations, specifically saying that it would have to be similar weight and length to similarly designed firearms, and that goes again for the length of pull. There's also sights or a scope with eye relief that requires shouldering to use, whether the surface area that allows shouldering is created by a buffer tube or other attachment necessary for the cycle of operations. That one is important because it does mean that you can shoulder and fire a plain buffer tube on an AR pistol. It cannot have any extra surface area or checkering on the back of it to aid in stability when shouldering, but you can shoulder it. They also factor in the manufacturer's direct and indirect marketing and promotional materials, which they get pretty picky here because indirect means any old guy with a YouTube channel, like me. So if I take something that is 100% intended for use in a certain way and use it differently, that can affect its ruling. They even reference advertisements on websites that put braces under a stocks category instead of making a separate brace category, I guess, or an advertisement that accidentally calls something a stock. They go over a longer definition of rifle, which says that firearms with braces can possess objective design features that make them rifles, but falls back on if it's designed and intended to be shoulder fired as the primary component. The ATF will, of course, review new submissions of braces to see if they qualify as rifles or not. And remember, these were always illegal. It just was not clear before, even though this rule overrides any previous letters saying that certain braces are okay. So yeah, not a redefinition at all, just clarifying the law. And in their generosity, they are allowing the public to register these already illegal items as SBRs. The ATF is even waiving the $200 tax that normally accompanies this registration, which may be illegal on their part. And there is no limit to the number of firearms you can register this way for free, or, without the additional tax. And due to the incoming deluge of potential registrations, you can use a receipt that you get when you file a Form 1 that contains proof that you submitted it before the 120 days in place of a tax stamp as you await approval from the ATF. So, as long as you have your ducks in a row, you can wait until the last day and put your Form 1 application in if you are waiting for potential lawsuits to stop this power grab before going to all the trouble of SBRing everything. If you decide not to register it, you can put a longer barrel on it, permanently remove and dispose of the brace as I discussed earlier, turn in your firearm to the local ATF office, or destroy it. Don't do those last two. In the meantime, you cannot make or transfer any weapons with stabilizing braces that the ATF now considers an SBR, so panic buying is also probably a no-go. It goes through the history of braces that were submitted before and their evolution, and talks about the 49.99 worksheet that they threw out, acknowledging the comments were a factor. And there were 217,000 comments against this rule, but of course they ignored that. There were, of course, dumb people commenting in support of this ruling against braces, including one FUD that was supposedly retired military with a familiarity with firearms that said if a weapon does not fit in a holster at the waist or shoulder or can be hidden in a pocket, then it is not a handgun. So if it does fit, does that make it a handgun? What about a folding shotgun? Or, of course, someone saying, I love the 2A, love my guns, never give them up. That being said, if you put it to your shoulder, it's a rifle. What an enthusiastic idiot. And you can't forget the guy who is a longtime shooting enthusiast saying that this whole thing has been a marketing tool to sell firearms to people that do not have enough knowledge to make informed purchasing decision. People buy terrible guns all the time, man. That does not mean that they should be heavily regulated. And in a lady doth protest too much manner, the ATF continues to insist that this is not a new law, but a clarification. One thing that was brought up in a lot of the comments is that this violates the ADA since braces were made to help those with disabilities. It says, well, we aren't banning them, so it doesn't violate ADA anyways, but also this does not discriminate solely by reason of their disability because it is a boot on the neck of everyone equally. They admit their worksheet was terrible, which is a funny admission, though they can't admit that there were any factual errors. They finally go a little bit into the determination of surface area that allows for shoulder firing. The ATF will not try to measure surface area or make a determination of a minimum amount of area that allows shoulder fire. Instead, the ATF will consider whether there is any surface area on the firearm that can be used to shoulder fire the weapon. If it has any, it is potentially a rifle. They reiterate they do not believe it is appropriate to specify a quantifiable metric for what constitutes surface area that allows for shouldering. It's almost the same paragraph a few pages apart. One funny thing from the originally proposed rule said that if it includes a design or feature that prevents shouldering, it may not be an SBR. And in the final rule, it even specifies that a permanently attached protrusion that would dig into a shooter's shoulder is a potential example of this. So hear me out. Add a spike to the back of a brace and just get tough, guys, or any of you masochists are good to go. Take that pain and shoulder fire that pistol. Yeah, and if a completely separate company made some sort of shoulder protecting pad against spikes that you can wear, it's all good, man, until they act like it's an 80% lower and reverse that too. They again mentioned that the statutes are not changing. The ATF did not employ a correct understanding of existing statutes. And remember, you were already all felons if you had one. Then they make the absurd defense that the ATF never said braces may be equipped without evaluating the objective design features of the firearm, and that it would lead to the illogical result that anything that purports to be a stabilizing brace makes a firearm a pistol regardless of design, and include a picture of a 50 BMG rifle with a brace, saying that if the ATF were to accept this position, a large 50 caliber firearm would fall outside the definition of rifle, solely because you attached a brace, which is the complete opposite of the argument. It's that a pistol remains a pistol with a brace. This is clearly a rifle. At least cut down the barrel on the example so it's pistol length. Nobody said that anything with a brace is a pistol. Who made that argument? I don't think anyone put a pistol brace on a full length rifle and then tried to say it's a pistol. I don't even know what they're trying to talk about here. So, those are the highlights from the rule. Like I said, there's an accompanying FAQ that makes a few other things clear. If you have a trust and register your SBRs to them that you already have, you cannot do that here unless you provide proof that it already belonged to the trust before this rule came out, which is dumb. Also, if you're aware, one part of a Form 1 in making an SBR is a requirement to mark the firearm since you are making an SBR, usually with your name or trust name and city state where you reside. However, it says that you can use the maker's marking on the firearm instead of putting that information on there. Since they were technically the manufacturer, since they were always SBRs, that's the case if you purchased something with the brace attached, but if you built off of a lower, you would technically still need your personal information engraved on there. Also, if your state bans NFA items, you still cannot possess it locally. The ATF will reject your registration, and if your state bans an AR platform with a barrel of 16 inches or longer as an assault rifle, you can't just change out the barrel either. And if they ban both, you are kind of SOL unless you remove the brace. And most importantly, they provide 2 documents with a long list of firearms with braces that are totally SBRs. And like I said before, they do not provide any examples of braced firearms that would be okay. So let's go over those lists real quick now. I don't know how good my commentary is going to be on this part of the video, to be honest, but here you can see AR type firearm with an SBA3 attached is an SBR, another AR, SBR, SBR, SBM4 AR, SOB attached, SBXK, AR type firearm mini SB attached, SBL. So a lot of AR types here, but they get into others here shortly. Tailhook. Glock type platforms. Flex's SBR. And these Glock particular ones are kind of funny because you're going to have to register the Glock itself. And coming up, you have the Microroni type pistols, braces. So, yeah, you're registering the tiny Glock for this giant hunk of plastic to throw it in there. But as you can see, it goes over a variety of types, a variety of things that are being sold, obviously already in the thousands, if not more. And it just really negates a huge part of the current firearms market. And that's the whole point here. They really want to just get rid of common use firearms as much as possible. Even if it stays in place for only 5 or 10 years, I mean, that can kill the current market and prevent others from being interested in coming back into it if this is overturned several years from now. So the best bet is that something gets overturned before this comes into actual rule, because it's just going to hurt so many firearms industry. It's going to hurt so many in the firearms industry as far as, suppliers, and a lot of gun shops just have a lot of these braced pistols, and they're all going to have to be sold as SBR items. Even if they allow them to change them into SBRs, which they will, it just means that it's an extra $200 tax stamp and waiting period and all this other stuff to deal with, which people will just not do, at least not in the numbers that they currently experience. As you can see, this is a huge variety of braces, and even that, like this tailhook variety, it legitimately acts as a good brace because it provides a counterbalance to the front of the barrel where the back of the brace pushes up on you as the front tilts down. But because when it's configured in the closed position, they say, well, it's too much like a stock. So it's a stock because it has an area which you can shoulder, which does go on to my point that what will count, because they say, well, we're going to go into what is a brace. So, like, this clearly looks like a functional brace. So, what is going to be, how are they going to determine what is legal? To me, the fact that they say nothing about what would be legal, like, they could easily provide an example of something being sold now with a brace and say, yes, this is, light enough, or the balance, or has such a small amount of surface area that this is a braced pistol and not an SBR with this configuration. But they just do not do that here. They really just want to outlaw these completely. Now, I've never even seen a lot of these. Like, a bolt action braced pistol is kind of funny to me. But so those are the two lists they put out that specifically call out things as SBRs. Obviously, it's a lot more than just that. That's not exhaustive at all. But that just goes to show where they are at right now. So that's that. Obviously, my opinion on this rule should be evident from the video, but there is, of course, some hope that there will be lawsuits that can stop this thing before the 120 days are up. As for what you should personally do, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, man. What do I know? I'm just a voice on YouTube. But please support this voice. Subscribe to my new Patreon that just launched this month. Like this video, share it around with friends so you can tell them you're cool because you were secretly committing felonies all this time. Don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. Check out my other content, and thanks for watching.